for joining us. I'd like to start by saying we greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and sit and listen to us for an hour. Without further ado, I will hand you over to Dr. Waxman. He's going to talk about the ERC and a few other bits that are going on. So, Dr. Waxman.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk to you about some opportunities for you in terms of research and writing. I know a lot of you here, but I'll do a brief bio in case some of you don't know my background. I'm a former elementary middle school teacher in Chicago. Chicago Public Schools, product of the Chicago school system. I went to a high school that was clearly acknowledged by the Secretary of Education as the worst high school in the world. So that's a good thing. I've gotten my PhD in Educational Research and Evaluation from the University of Illinois Chicago, which is in the heart of sort of the inner city Chicago. And then from there, I sort of did maybe a non-traditional career path. I started out as a postdoc for Learning Research and Development Center, University of Pittsburgh. Clearly one of the premier research centers in the world. Federally funded new R&D building in the heart of Pittsburgh, where 8-story building where it was just researchers. College of Education a half mile away, so it was really a number of eminent sort of psychologists, sociologists, and educators who were working on a variety of different kind of research issues at Pittsburgh. Bob Glazer and Warren Resnick, if you're familiar with sort of the gurus in learning, who were co-directors of the center at the time. Since then, after working at LIBC, I actually was a professor at University of Houston for many years. But my other background sort of is a researcher at several R&D federally funded centers across the country. CEIC is the Center for Education in Inner Cities, which was one of these 5 years, national research centers where researchers from Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, and Los Angeles sort of focused on doing research on the inner city schools. CRE was the Center for Research and Education Diversity and Excellence, which was a group of researchers across the country from Johns Hopkins, University of California, and others. And again, that was another 5 years sort of longitudinal center where we worked on a number of different projects across the country. LSS is a unique one that I mentioned. If you know a little bit about American education and sort of the context, we have R&D centers, which are the first couple that I work with. The LSS, the Laboratory for Student Success, is one of the federally funded regional laboratories. And as a regional laboratory, we work very closely with schools. And we had a particular region, which was the Mid-Atlantic region and the center was out of Temple University in Philadelphia. So I spent a lot of time going to Philadelphia for a 5 or 6 year period. But we did a number of issues related to, I guess my project in particular was focusing on improving education for English language learners across the country, though with a particular focus on Mid-Atlantic region. I've been at TLAC, this is my 9th year, I think, and I direct the Education Research Center here, which is a university-based center, which I'll talk about in a second. And then just recently I've been appointed as a faculty fellow in teacher education from TLAC. Educational Research Center, I think it's the 7th year that we've been in existence. We originally got funding from Texas Education Agency and Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board to do a number of projects, competitive grant. There were 2 other centers in the state. One was UT Austin, the other UT Dallas. The purpose was clearly to be self-sufficient, meaning we get no resources. When I say no, that is absolutely true. No resources from anyone in the college or a university. So whatever we do now, whatever we do, we have to do through grants. We have several full-time researchers involved, graduate students and interns. So when I talk about projects, I guess some of Tracy, Nancy, and others, I'll call on you guys to say something to Albert too. There are a number of faculty involved and other faculty across A&M. And there are about 10 currently funded projects going on in the center, some of which I'll talk about. Some of the early ones, and I'll sort of highlight those. One of the first sort of external grants we got was looking at college access centers at the lowest performing high schools in Houston. This is a Gates Foundation project where they argued if you put in college access centers in schools, it'll help students in terms of graduating and going on to college. College access centers are sort of one-stop sort of centers where they really help kids sort of focus on applying for school and going to college. We saw some really outstanding programs going on, and meanwhile, in addition to the Gates, the Gates College Access Centers, the state also had been funding a number of college access centers. So we got a sort of first sort of relatively big grant where the state actually paid us to look at exemplary centers across the state of Texas. So we got to go to a number of different programs in schools across the state to look at these college access centers. We've done a number of grants with IB schools. We first focused on IB schools in Texas, then Sonny and Tracy actually helped on a recent grant related to collaboration in IB schools, and we're doing a current study on reflection in IB schools in North America. So now we're going to, we're identifying schools across North America where we're going to actually do case studies and going to Canada, I don't know, Mexico. We're going to be going across the country to look at the component of reflection in IB, for those who aren't familiar, International Baccalaureate Schools, a very large program that's widely implemented across the country. We've done a number of things related to STEM. I'll talk about some of those later, and in particular, some of the big things we've been dealing with the college career readiness standards in Texas, and implementing them in teacher education as well as high school classrooms. What we do, if you have an idea of the kinds of things we do everything. We do a lot of mixed method research. For whatever reason, which is interesting, the state IB, some of the funders really like case studies. So we do a lot of case study type research where we go and do a sort of more in-depth study of a school or a program. A lot of the things that we do, it also involves systematic classroom observations. So we do a lot of sort of going in and doing sort of low inference observations of teachers, students, and overall classroom aspects. We have been involved in longitudinal quantitative databases, as well as content analyses and meta-analyses as well. Sonny and Tracy, for example, helped us with the meta-analysis of collaboration in IB schools and IB programs. So those are some of the things we do. Ongoing, there are a number of things, and again, I'll just sort of briefly touch on some of those. The big one, I think, is the United Way Greater Houston Education Initiative. And if you allow me, let me skip ahead and I'm happy. Alba Barona is a doctoral student at EPSI who's actually been working on it. Nancy's done a little bit, I think, on this as well. But we've been working, this is our third year, with working in 25 agencies in Houston and about 500,000 students in Houston schools. So you can see it's a big, complex project. We've created data arrangements with Houston, Spring Branch, Aldine, Fort Bend, and there's a fifth one. Some of the large urban school districts. So we have data from the schools that are coming to us related to these agencies. Now, for a sense of agencies, boys clubs, girls club, other agencies.
Escape.
Yeah, Escape Family Parenting. There's YMCA. A lot of these are nonprofit agencies that really do a lot of sort of after-school programs, summer programming. Houston Urban League, another big agency that has a lot of sort of external programs. In Houston, there are probably more than 25 agencies, but these are all community-based sort of agencies that really do a lot of educational training. Some of it after school, some of it pre-K, some of it, summer learning. So there are a number of agencies. Children's Museum of Houston, another big agency that focuses on a lot of sort of educational trainings. So what the Houston United Way Greater Houston does, the thing in common is United Way funds all of these programs. So what they said is we can't continue to keep on funding all of these, and we have no idea whether they're effective or not. That's one. And two, there has to be a way that they can work collaboratively. So there are a number of different things going on. The collaborative agency collaboration and effectiveness, that's where it started. They want to see how these agencies, these very diverse agencies, can work together to improve the education of kids. And they also want to see how effective they are. That's why they have all this very specific student achievement data that they're focusing on. There are other things too. There's clearly affective components and United Way is really into socio-emotional learning kinds of aspects, so that part is really went prevalent as well. So there's the overall agency kinds of collaboration effectiveness. There are very specific kinds of programs. Reading Together is a volunteer tutoring program for young kids in disadvantaged circumstances. So volunteers from the community, adults, will actually work with kids in reading programs, helping second and third graders to read. So that's been going on for 3 years. Learning Together Math, Alba, you want to talk about it? Alba's actually doing her dissertation on that aspect. You want to just briefly?
Briefly. The Learning Together Math is a program in which we match two students that is cross-age tutoring. So we have one student, for example, in 7th grade with one student in 8th grade. So the younger student becomes the tutee and the other student is the tutor. So it is a very interesting program because I'm very organized, because the coordinators or the teacher first give the lessons to the tutors, and the tutors have a whole a box of material, so they have the scripted lesson. They receive the lesson first, and they practice how they are going to give the lesson to the tutee. After that, they are ready. Some schools, for example, have this teacher-tutor meeting on Monday, and on Tuesday or Thursday, there is a meeting between the tutor and the tutee. So the tutor is in charge of giving a brief lesson and help the tutee to solve problems. So hopefully, we think that the students will be more comfortable with children with the same age, to talk and be able to ask questions that otherwise in the classroom they won't, because for several reasons. Some of the reasons could be they are English language learners, so they have difficult vocabulary, so when they are in class, they are so able, or they don't have the emotional skills developed to answer in front of the whole class.
Thank you. The research, the prior research on peer tutoring is really very positive. So, and in particular, it's not only positive for the tutee, but for the tutor as well. And because this one, I think this program is a little unique. It's out of a company from North Carolina that's sort of been doing this for a while. But what's unique is the tutors are older, but you would think they'd get the high achieving kids, and they don't. They get sort of kids at risk to tutor younger kids at risk. So that's sort of a math program that's going on. There are parent education programs, and I just want to briefly mention there's a number of summer learning loss programs. For those of you who are probably aware that there's kids from disadvantaged circumstances often sort of decline their academic skills during the summer. So what the United Way has done is funded a number of different kinds of programs during the summer to sort of combat the summer learning loss. Some of them are basic skills, but a lot of them are collaboration. They have a robotics sort of program that helps, I think. They have book clubs where they, a group of kids work together on focus on literacy as well. So there are a number of different aspects, summer learning loss. So this is a big project that's ongoing. It's only the third year. We think that's going to probably continue for the next 4 or 5 years. If anything, they've been expanding sort of their services, and they've gotten really good feedback. It's been they're really challenging in that you can imagine that these programs are all over the place, and getting documentation in terms of academic outcomes and student IDs has been a real challenge, but they're making progress. And as I said, when you've got that many kids from an urban metropolitan area, you can imagine the difficulty. So that's sort of United Way. A&M STEP Collaborative, Jen Whitfield's involved in that. Do you want to say anything or not?
Sure. So there's a research component. There's many components to the A&M STEP Collaborative. There's a research component, a component to research teacher education, and then there's also teacher professional development. And within the teacher professional development, there's even 2 venues in which it can be an online STEM certificate or actual face-to-face professional development that we did this summer, all related to STEM integration, and a lot of project-based learning is going into that as well.
Okay, thank you. Some of the other things, we've got several evaluations. Do you guys want to mention Reasoning Minds? You want to say anything or no? No. Reasoning Minds, and I called on you, I put you on the spot. They just attended a meeting a week ago, but the Reasoning Minds is a really trying to describe it. It was a locally developed math program, actually, but it really stemmed from Russia. There's some Russian educators that have been known to implement math instruction a little bit differently than in the States. So the founders of this, I guess I'll call it a corporation or company, really focused on exemplary instruction in Russia and translated to the United States. So it's an online sort of, you could call it tutoring, but it's a little bit more than that. It's an online math curriculum for grades 3, and now it's going into the middle school. So, but this is a big time program. I'll talk about our part, and I'll talk about the national part. Nationally, they've been implementing the program all over the country and gotten grants from Institute of Educational Sciences, National Science Foundation, So they're implementing the program all over the country. In in Texas, they got a grant from Texas Education Agency. So they're implementing the program at about 200, maybe to 200 to 250 schools across Texas. And they've been doing it for a while. And what we're doing as part of the evaluation is evaluating the success of that program. But again, this is interesting because you can tell it's very quantitative, and they have ongoing data since it's on a computer. But they also want us to do case studies of sort of implementation, especially focused on sort of the observations of what's going on in those classrooms when the kids are working on the program. It's really interesting because even though it's one-to-one sort of computer-based, teacher has a large role in it. And some teachers, if they're very proactive, will work closely with kids during doing computer session, and others will be very passive. And they acknowledge that that's a key aspect to the program, which is why we're doing some case studies of effective implementation. Some of the others, E-Teams and STEM High School. E-Teams is a NSF project that's run out of Corpus Christi, Texas, where the College of Education and the College of Science are working in middle schools with pre-service teacher ed students to get them more involved in sort of STEM issues. So they are, their field methods classes are spending like a day in middle schools in STEM classrooms, and the science faculty from sciences are working in the public schools along with the College of Education. So we've been working on that for a couple of years. And the STEM High School is a unique program that opened up at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. And they developed a specific STEM high school for their kids, and we're following them for the next 4 years to see how well kids that go through the STEM high school in terms of success, in terms of choosing science careers when they go to college. So that's sort of some of the ongoing. I'm going to stop for questions.
Yeah, we can take questions. If you want to stop.
I will stop for questions if anyone, because now I'm going to a new part.
Okay. Does anybody have questions on the first part?
So I actually worked with reading minds. I was part of the pilot group here at Bryan ISD 5 years ago.
I didn't know that.
I can chime in and comment about any questions about. I've seen with different people.
What you've seen 5 years ago versus today is not today.
Well, I mean, I've seen the teacher part
Yeah.
of how teachers respond to the training reports and interventions. That part, which
Since you brought it up, I'll tell you how different it is now. You saw a traditional sort of tutoring kind of program. These are the questions, these are the answers, sort of thing. Now they've got a sort of a much more virtual environment. So if Matt's getting on the doing his program, you're going to be in a class with 4 other students, and they're going to ask questions. And you can imagine some of them are going to be like Randy and ask, stupid questions. Sorry, you knew I was going to get you for that. And others will ask very smart questions. But that social media component, that social media component is going to be really, they think, really important. And they've never had that before. And I think some of the newer generations of virtual learning environments have that sort of social media kinds of aspects where you're interacting with, virtual peers in a sense, even though it's fictitious. Let me move ahead. Sort of the last thing I want to talk about briefly is sort of the new exciting thing in terms of a new big project supported by TLAC. And for those of you who don't know, that there's a real push in the college, in the department, to focus on more teacher education research. And a lot of my colleagues are doing a number of things, but this is sort of one aspect that I've sort of initiated starting this semester. And sort of the background for it, if you're not familiar, I mean, there's clearly inequitable distributions in terms of high-quality teachers in schools, and I think a lot of you know those sort of issues. But the kids that from these high schools have fewer opportunities to learn, and I think it's sort of interesting. Simultaneously, the federal government and President Obama's got an initiative going on dealing with this issue as well. So I think it's clearly everyone's acknowledged that it's a serious problem, and that what we really need to sort of address the issue of inequitable distribution in schools. The other thing that's really important is the notion that there's so much variance within schools. And I want to talk a little bit about this because this is sort of an important part of the framework. You know, all of us sort of are aware that, you know, students that come from sort of high poverty schools, the quality of teaching is very different than those in low poverty schools. But what people don't understand, and the general public, is that even within a particular school, and pick a low poverty school, a school that's very successful, there's great variation. And that's what the research sort of indicates. That it becomes a real concern. And you know, when you talk about it in terms of the specific schools and the lack of instructional consistency is the term, that hinders student learning. And I'll give you an example. I think that many of you are probably former classroom teachers, so you know. If you're in an elementary school, where do the best teachers go? What grade level?
K1 and 2, so they don't have to be tested.
Okay, that's a philosophy, K1 or 2. So they get a good start. You know, that would make sense, but in reality, that doesn't always happen.
Third grade.
Third grade because?
First year of testing.
Thank you. First, look at third grade and see the number of experienced, high-quality teachers that teach third grade. I mean, there are clearly these inconsistencies in quality of instruction even within schools, and it's argued that this variance within a school is even greater than it is across schools. So that's something we can look at. Okay, the project, obviously, and I did mention Dr. Lee, so I acknowledge it's all your fault. I think there is a real concern that we all need to focus on doing high-quality research and teacher-ed research, and I know my colleagues are addressing it as well. But in particular, this project is going to focus on doctoral students' expertise and teacher ed, and obviously the impact that high-quality research will have on policy and practice. Okay, now what does this mean in reality? Okay, a number of different things. And I should mention there are a bunch of you who are involved in this already. I mean, Matt, Kenneth, Luke, I mean, everyone's here, so. My class, and they did this on their own, they decided they wanted to look on these issues this semester. So we're doing a number of different things. We're doing secondary data analysis, we're doing meta-analysis. We're not so much focusing on classroom observation research, though Nancy's here if she wanted to talk to her about, part of her dissertation is really very interesting, looking at first-year classroom teachers and interns and comparing them to experienced teachers. Really interesting work related to classroom observation, and then a number of things Tracy, Nancy, and others have done related to pre-service teachers' confidence and self-efficacy for teaching. And they're sort of, they've done a number of things, including received awards. So there are a number of different things, and I should point out Lucy's helping with the civil rights data and children at risk data, which is really, to me, is extremely exciting because I think we can look at sort of outcome data for schools, and what we're looking at is in particular urban cities in Texas, and relating them to civil rights data like certification of teachers. So these are sort of some of the studies that we're dealing in. Now, here's the big plug. And there's a survey. I know I'm running out of time. Is that?
A survey as well.
Yeah. A survey.
You have IRB for that? You have IRB approval?
Yeah.
No. There are a number of students already working on sort of seminar internship courses, as well as independent collaborative research projects. We've got a couple of books on teacher education that we're going to be working on, and as well as some dissertations. So there are a number of opportunities, and as I said, there are a large number of you who are already involved. But if you're interested in doing something or continuing to work on it, I will do something formal this spring, perhaps do a seminar, and I talked to Dr. Grobe already. We can do it as a seminar course, independent study, depending on how many of you are interested, or there are other sort of possibilities. But there are really a number of sort of opportunities for all of you to get involved if you're interested. I think, the research is good, but I think in addition, we've got some books coming out that I think that I clearly expect most doctoral students to be involved with. I know many of you have been written chapters for Dr. Lee's book on teacher ed, which has really been sort of, I think, created a big sort of push in terms of doing research in teacher ed. And I think we'll be working on other books, and I know that there'll be other colleagues that are going to be doing it as well. So for the next few years, I think there's going to be a real big push to do sort of teacher ed research, and a lot of colleagues who, my colleagues, faculty who are interested in working with you on a number of different projects. And there I'll stop and let's see if there are questions. Call on Kenneth. If you guys want to talk a little bit about what you're doing? No? Sunny?
Do you want to let Sunny say it, because we can get on with the meeting now?
Actually, can I just ask a technical question?
Absolutely.
Looking at this checklist, I know what a 689 is, I know what an internship, but what's the difference between a 684 and a 685 practically? Like, I know you put a description, but...
I'm glad Dr. Burrows here.
685 is an independent study or directed study course, which you and a faculty member sit down and decide what you want to learn about. That's not offered as a regular course.
Okay.
It can be most anything you want to cover. An internship is where you spend time with an agency or some organization, usually 200 hours a semester, doing specific tasks related to that organization in order to learn something from it.
Okay, thank you.
If there are enough of you interested, we do have a course that we've identified that we can use for next semester. But again, I know there are a number of you that have started, and I'm sorry, Sunny, I'd left you. You're supposed to do you don't want to say anything? That's fine.
I have a question.
Yes.
How you can do to integrating common gold standard in teacher education program? That means you will provide some teacher education program, or you will develop some materials.
Yeah, good question. We received a large grant from the coordinating board. Dr. Kelly, Dr. Smith, Dr. Silsano, and I were in co-PIs on a 4-year project from Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, where we worked with teacher ed faculty, sort of incorporating the standards in the teacher ed programs. And we've had summer seminars. Jen Withhill presented on that before, and we've been, I don't know, Nancy, you want to say anything about it? You've been looking at that program too. But for the most part, we focused on it. We focused on the whole teacher ed program. We focused in depth in one particular program, the post-bac program, where they do internships. But for the most part, they've been integrating career and college readiness standards for 4 years, 5 years.
This is the fifth year.
5th year. And what's nice, we have longitudinal research, some of which Nancy's done, sort of looking at them across time to see if there's changes in cohorts.
Data's been collected through several different avenues. I mean, all different kinds of data for each cohort.
Other questions? Well, thank you. Please email me if you have any questions, or if you're interested in working with us. Everybody's modest, but I think, Matt, I could have you talk as well, but there are a number of folks involved in doing research right now, sort of the teacher ed aspect.